It is December 31, 1502. Four of the most battle-tested mercenary generals in Italy ride into the coastal town of Senigallia, expecting a routine military planning session with their commander. Cesare Borgia greets them with a smile. He guides them deep into the palace, settling the group into a dimly lit secret chamber, while their own troops remain camped outside the city walls. Cesare quietly exits the room under the pretense of business. Behind him, the oak doors slam shut. The lock turns. Suddenly, the shadows in the room reveal armed guards. These four generals had survived decades of Renaissance warfare. To understand why such paranoid men walked willingly into this locked room, we have to look at the man who set the bait and the dynasty that forged him. In 1492, Rodrigo Borgia became Pope Alexander VI, immediately transforming the papacy into a family-owned business.
He shattered tradition by acknowledging his illegitimate children, using Vatican wealth to build a hereditary monarchy, determined to turn central Italy into a private Borgia duchy. His instrument was his son, Cesare Borgia. Cesare resigned his position as a cardinal, an act without precedent in church history, to become the Duke of Valentinois and the Vatican's primary warlord. Funded by his father, Cesare launched an aggressive military sweep across the Romagna region. He utilized papal gold and French lancers to systematically hunt down and annihilate every local ruler in his path. This rapid centralization of power disrupted the old feudal system. Cesare had transitioned from a useful ally into an existential threat to every independent warlord on the peninsula. In October 1502, Cesare's own mercenary captains realized their territories were his next targets. They gathered at the castle of Maione to launch a preemptive strike. The conspirators swore an oath to abandon Cesare's command. They allied their combined forces against him, resolving to dismantle his newly conquered territories before he could consume theirs. The betrayal left Cesare crippled on the battlefield. Without his core generals and their veteran troops, he suffered a series of crushing military defeats. Outmanned and outgunned, the Borgia state was on the verge of collapse. Cesare realized that brute military force alone would not defeat a coordinated rebellion from within. Cesare pivoted to a campaign of simulation and psychological warfare. He began prioritizing the trap over the battlefield. First, he manufactured vulnerability. Cesare publicly sent his elite French troops away, intentionally feigning a lack of defense to lower the conspirators' guard. Second, he exploited their greed. Cesare offered the captains lavish gifts, horses, and a formal treaty of reconciliation. He promised them lucrative new contracts if they simply returned to his side. Finally, he set the mechanical trap. He requested the captains capture Senigallia for him, but insisted they leave their main armies outside the city as a gesture of good faith. This left the generals isolated and defenseless as they entered the fortress. Exploiting his enemies' greed and internal paranoia proved far more effective than fielding a superior army. In the early hours of January 1st, the first two generals were executed. They were seated on a bench and strangled with a cord. Their lives ended by a single twist of an iron bar. But the purge didn't end in Senigallia. 200 miles away in Rome, Pope Alexander VI launched a synchronized secondary strike on the exact same night. The Pope invited the conspirators' family head, Cardinal Orsini, to the Vatican under the guise of peace. Once inside, he was arrested and thrown into the dungeon of Castel Sant'Angelo, where he was slowly poisoned to death. Once the Pope successfully neutralized the cardinal and seized his Roman estates, Cesare executed the remaining hostages in Senigallia. This Roman double tap achieved the multi-city annihilation of an entire rival power structure in one perfectly coordinated strike. In the wake of the massacre, Cesare Borgia emerged as the undisputed master of central Italy. However, the Borgia Empire relied entirely on the life of the Pope. That foundation shattered in August 1503 when Alexander VI suddenly died. At the exact moment his father passed, Cesare contracted a deathly illness. Stricken with fever and bedridden, he lacked the physical strength to defend his consolidated territories from his returning enemies. Among the witnesses to this rise and fall was a young diplomat named Niccolò Machiavelli. He had watched the Senigallia massacre from inside Cesare's court. Cesare's ruthless deception at Senigallia became the direct inspiration for Machiavelli's masterwork, The Prince. Machiavelli concluded that to secure power, a ruler cannot rely on honor, To survive, a prince must be a lion to crush his enemies with force, and a fox to lead them into the trap.